Hey everyone, and welcome to today's podcast. Today we'll be speaking about the benefits of mindfulness. And so, very simply, what mindfulness is the ability for us as human beings to be fully present, to be fully aware of where we are, what we are doing, and more importantly, not to be overly reactive to everything that's happening around us.
So it's about bringing your emotions and your thoughts to what you're doing at that moment in time. And there's a lot of research that has been done which has showed that mindfulness, the practice of mindfulness, improves the remodeling, the structure of the brain. So that's quite interesting. But before we go on further, obviously, I think what is the main benefits of being mindful and practicing mindfulness? So what are the benefits of being mindful? Because I think everybody will want to know what that is. And there's many benefits, firstly, but one of the benefits is that it actually shrinks the physical stress region of the brain. In other words, it reduces your stress. But they've done many studies that have actually shown that individuals who practice mindfulness, that the physical structure of the brain that deals with stress actually shrinks. So that's quite interesting.
Well, and if you think about the benefits in terms of a lot of people are experiencing anxiety. And what is anxiety really? It's fear of what is going to happen. So fear of the future. And so I'm here physically, but my mind is feeling anxious because I'm focused on what's happening tomorrow, next week, next year. And my thoughts are running away with me to a point that I feel overwhelmed. And what is actually happening in that moment is I'm physically here, but my mind's not. And so there's a split internally. And it's the same with depression as well. What is depression? Depression is when we replay scenarios of the past like it's a stuck record on autoplay. And it's just going over and over past events, what could have happened, what should have happened, replaying hurtful experiences, replaying things that were said to you. And what you're actually doing in that moment is you're bringing your entire energy level of your whole being down. You're affecting yourself spiritually. More importantly, when it comes to mindfulness is I'm physically here, but my mind is running in the past. And so again, there's this internal split. And so when we're experiencing anxiety or depression, we're not in alignment with who we are. And how do you bring yourself to alignment is by being mindful. In other words, I'm physically here, but my mind is here as well. And we're going to talk a bit about the benefits and then more importantly, how we can actually practice mindfulness.
Yeah. And one of the other benefits is that it actually, according to science, it improves your working memory, which means your ability to recall information once you're busy with something, to recall it at a later stage. If you practice mindfulness or if you're very aware of what you're doing at that point in time, it improves your ability to actually recall that information. And by saying that, we can therefore also deduce that practicing mindfulness or being mindful also improves your production and your productivity. Instead of, if we look on the other side of the spectrum, a lot of the time we're actually practicing multitasking. So our mind is all over the show and we believe we're actually getting a lot done when we're multitasking because we're doing a little bit here, a little bit there, and we're trying to do it all at the same time, right? But our brain is not really designed in that way where we can multitask. So what we're actually doing when we say we're multitasking is we're doing short tasks in quick succession, and that's how our brain interprets that information. So what that means then is that your brain constantly has to readjust to what you're busy with. Hence, your productivity, in fact, decreases. So when you work on one thing at a time and you focus and bring your awareness to one thing at a time and you're mindful about that, your productivity, in fact, increases because your brain is now solely focused on what it is that you need to do instead of thinking, oh, I need to do this, I need to do that. It's very, very interesting.
It is. And for those, I mean, I used to be a real avid multitasker, and I thought I was so brilliant because I could literally juggle so many balls at once. But what I noticed is at the end of the day, I'm exhausted. And to realize now that that is actually not good for my brain, that it's actually stop, restart on the next task, stop, restart on the next task. So you're getting things done, but it is affecting your brain. It is affecting the quality of what you're producing. And it's not good for your own mental well-being. And I think it's really important to highlight that.
Oh, the other thing that mindfulness and where it can improve your life is that it improves your relationships. That is both your personal and obviously your business relationships. And we don't have to look very far because a lot of the time people, when your family or you have a personal relationship or business relationship and you interact with an individual, many a times, for example, people are distracted by the phone. So they cannot possibly be aware of what's happening right in front of them. So through practicing mindfulness, you become aware and you learn to let go of other distractions and you give the individual who's in front of you your full attention. And once you give someone your full attention, their response to you also changes. I mean, many times we see it in a restaurant. People are at the restaurant sitting at the table, but they are on their phones and they're still having a conversation. So there's no way that you can be connected at that point in time because of the distraction of the mobile phone, for example. We also see, for example, and it sounds like I'm a little bit against mobile phones, but I'm not. But like even when people are driving and they're on the mobile phone, you know, they're not fully aware of the handling of the vehicle that they're in. And this is how accidents are caused. But it definitely improves your relationship because it improves your ability to connect with the individual on the other side of you.
And your partner that is being heard by your undivided attention or is listening to you attentively is actually downloading, I'm important. And that is why he or she hasn't picked up their phone. It is actually making eye contact with me and connecting with me. So it has huge benefits for your personal relationships as well as business.
And come to think of it, when we speak about giving the person attention and giving your sole attention to that individual, we mentioned earlier about it improves your working memory. So if you're giving that individual your attention, then you're going to have a lot less moments where you go, for example, what is it that you said again? Or that's not what you said, or I understood it differently. You know, at the later stage, you're going to refer back to that interaction that you had. And so it definitely does improve your relationships and your connection and yourself on a social level. So what is mindfulness to you, and on a personal level? What is it to you on a personal level?
So being a previous multitasker addict and a previous anxiety sufferer, I can definitely confirm that the multitasking would cause me to be really tired, not functioning properly. And obviously, if you're doing that day after day after day, it is going to have a knock-on effect. With regards to having anxiety, I can tell you off the bat, it was continuous obsession with what is going to happen in the future. And it is very important to highlight that I don't suffer from anxiety at all. Yes, there's moments of stress in my life, but not to a point where it's consuming me to a point of not functioning. And we as a couple practice meditation, and more importantly, there's the entire day to get through. But I've noticed personally when the days I start with meditation, and very importantly, I set an intention for the day. So that's really just visualizing my day, putting out the best intention for how my day is going to go. If I have meetings, if we're shooting, if, we're preparing, or whatever the day entails, I visualize it very quickly in a short clip. But there is an intention around my day. So it's very conscious of how I want my day to go. And 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, my day goes better than expected. And it comes from a point of being mindful. It comes from a very calm, centered place. So I know when I am coming out of a meditation or setting an intention or just being mindful in the moment, I'm very aligned with my source and with myself, more importantly, because my mind and my body is in the same place. And so it's had huge benefits. The days I don't meditate, let's say I've had a late night and the next morning, I just sleep a bit in and I don't have time then to meditate because the day needs to happen, then typically I find myself in chaos. It's just things aren't going the way I want it to go. It's just constant reactivity to what's happening around me. And so I can say with absolute conviction that there is such benefits in starting your day. If you can't, if you haven't established a meditative practice, then just start with 5 minutes of just sitting quietly, being consciously aware of your breath. We'll talk a bit about prayer and the benefits of that later on, but that for me also is really important. And so throughout my day, I would then have reminders. So what I've done is every hour on my phone, I'll have a beep go off. And it usually is an affirmation that is said, I am enough or I am worthy. But in that moment, it is a great reminder for me when I hear that beep or see the light up on my phone, I put down what I'm doing and that is my reminder. So it triggers me, okay, I've got to stop what I'm doing, just bring myself back to myself, bring myself back into the present moment, take a nice deep breath, and then move on to the next task with intention. And so it's definitely benefited me in many ways.
Okay, cool.
Okay, and then just maybe a bit about your personal experience in terms of mindfulness and the benefits that it's had in your life.
One of the things that I would say really allows me to be mindful when I'm doing it is actually cooking, because I find that it actually captures all 5 senses that we have, like sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. And when I'm doing that, I'm very aware of what I'm doing. So I'm kind of like in a zone. And so that's why I appreciate the cooking moments quite often. And just throughout the day, like you've mentioned meditation. I do meditation as well. We do it together often. But I think for me, a big part of me practicing mindfulness is my approach to prayer. And we pray, or we should be praying 5 times a day. And I think that is a nice reminder that I have throughout the day to be mindful. And so what I try and focus on is try and take the benefit out of the message of praying 5 times a day, for example. And so what I do, for example, when I do go and pray, I tell myself 2 things before I start, which is, this is where I need to be. There's nowhere else that I need to be. And secondly, I must enjoy the experience. So when I'm doing anything else outside of prayer, those are the exact 2 things I tell myself as well. Whether I'm working, whether I'm interacting with someone, I tell myself, this is where I need to be. And I need to enjoy the experience. There's nothing else for me to do. Brilliant. And I even do this when I'm doing like endurance events and it's starting to get really hard, and your mind might think of quitting, but I often tell myself there's nothing else I have to do that day or that moment, so I might as well carry on and go further. Okay, so that's things that I do to practice mindfulness and how I feel it improves my life on a personal level.
One thing that you did tell me years ago was when you did endurance events, you would, in the moments of it being hard, you would tell yourself, I love being here, and be appreciative of being here and being able to do this. And it's something that I've actually taken on board. So when, for example, I'm running and, it's becoming tiring, that's exactly what I say. I say, I love being here. I love the fact that my body is so healthy, giving me the ability to do this. In that moment, I give thanks. And then automatically I've changed my mindset to the positive, and it just goes easier. And that's something that I really want to mention here, is because mindfulness is being present, but even an affirmation in the moment is still bringing you present because you're adding meaning to what you're doing.
Yeah. So again, I mean, that example of doing an event and it gets hard, there's a lot of thoughts that go through your mind, and there's a lot of emotions. And as we described what mindfulness is, it's about being aware of your thoughts, the emotions, and what you're doing. So at that moment in time, you're actually quite mindful, and it's your mindfulness that gets you through it. Okay, so obviously you'd be asking then, so how do we practice mindfulness? What are the things we can do? And you've mentioned already meditation, which is one of the most common ways to practice mindfulness. And it requires maybe even 5-10 minutes of your time in the day. But I think the important thing is, because we are talking about being mindful throughout your day. So you're not going to be meditating 24/7. So the important thing is to take the benefit from that meditation, the consciousness that you gather from that, and try and then implement it in little areas of your life.
So meditation, I mean, we both would highly recommend it if you find yourself really mentally busy, always moving on to the next thing. You're busy with one thing, you're focusing already on what you need to do after this. It's usually an indication that your mind's pretty busy. You're not actually focused on what's happening. And so meditation is a really great tool to start training your mind, because your mind is like a muscle. When you go to gym and you are pushing weights because you really want to build your biceps, it's hard. It's not, someone's not going there and saying, oh, I'm going to do these weights and it's going to be really easy. It takes effort, it takes commitment, but it's also quite hard physically. And so it's the same thing with your mind. If you see your mind as a muscle, you need to train it. So it has unhealthy habits of negative thinking, of focusing on everything that's going wrong. And sometimes one thing might go wrong and 100 things for the day went right, and we'll focus on that one wrong thing, that or one event that has gone wrong. And so just very quickly on how to, if you're not someone that does meditate, is if you start your morning and you've done your prayers or you've made your bed, which I'd highly recommend you do, is then to sit for a moment. And I think there's a misconception around you need to sit in a Buddha position on the floor. And for me, that's very uncomfortable. So I sit on a couch with a great backrest so that I can be comfortable. And then if you want to start training your mind, is just to breathe gently in and out and just focus on your breath. You'll notice how busy your mind is, but all you do is just bring your awareness back to your breath, deep in, deep out, and aim for balanced breathing. So balance, breathe in gently, breathe out at the same gentle exhale as well. And that really helps and assists so that you can start quieting your mind down. And the more you do it, obviously it becomes a habit, and then it becomes second nature, where you could sit for 20 minutes, 30 minutes ideally, and feel really great.
Okay, and then the other thing and this is a practical one of how individuals can practice mindfulness, because I like to give people practical things to do, and especially clients, and I call it a cup of tea. But every morning, I think many of us will either have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, or we'll have some kind of breakfast, whether it's an apple you eat or banana. But when you have that cup of tea, for example, is to make sure at that moment that is the only thing you do, and that you appreciate that moment, that you appreciate that cup of tea, and you focus your thoughts and your emotions that you are experiencing at that moment on the cup of tea and what it gives you. So what I'm saying is, do not have the cup of tea and try and do the exercise and still think while you're sitting there, oh, I need to get done because I need to do this. Because a lot of the times we live our life thinking that the next moment's going to be better than the current one. And we get there and then that's not the case, right? So the idea of the practice is to focus your time, your energy on that cup of tea and just enjoy it, enjoy the experience again and tell yourself this is where I need to be. So I think if you do that on a regular basis and you try that exercise every morning, you can then start to build and try and implement that on other things that you do. But start off small, and that's why I say use a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, whatever it is. But try not to rush through the process in order to get to the next thing. That's the key.
And I think that's a beautiful example because you get so many parents that are super busy. Mornings are chaotic when they need to get the kids ready for school. And so, okay, I can understand there isn't time unless I'm getting up half an hour early, and sometimes you're so burnt out that's not possible because we live such busy lives. But you're going to have your cup of tea or coffee. And so if you use that time for as your time to just quiet down, reconnect, and do exactly what you said. And what you could add to that is just to do a little intention setting after the cup of tea. So I'm going to get the kids ready. I'm going to drive them to school. The traffic's going to flow. So you're setting an intention of how your day would like to go, or how you'd like your day to go. And typically you're doing that from such a deep centered place that it usually goes better than expected.
And then the other way in which to practice mindfulness, and some of us do this in any case, maybe without knowing it or realizing it, is through exercise and being out in nature. So firstly, with being out in nature, we all of a sudden become very aware of where we're at and what's around us. We admire the beauty that's around us. So you automatically feel a lot better, right? That's being out in nature. So it brings your awareness to where you're at. With regards to exercise, and I think we speak many times, we speak about mind, body, soul. And out of those three, for example, the one thing we know for sure is in the present moment is the physical body. The mind we know races. Now and then the mind is present, but it's either in the future or it's in the past. But the physical body is always in the present moment. So why exercise works so well? Because it involves the physical body. It involves movement. And so it brings the mind naturally to where the body is at, which is in the present moment. So as you were explaining earlier, with regards to perhaps running a marathon or something, that you're going through these thoughts, and they might not always be good thoughts because you might be thinking you're going to give up, but it brings you awareness to say, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm feeling. And then you come with counter thoughts for that very moment. So this is why physical exercise, whether it be yoga, because I know in yoga they do a lot of mind-body connection. So you have to really focus the mind on the position of the body, or whether you're cycling or running or swimming or walking. A lot of the time, most of the time, you cannot do that if your mind is not there. And even in diving, for example, you need to firstly... Diving is one of those things actually that we don't recommend you do if you're not in a good mental space, because you need to be fully aware of what you're doing. And because of the dangers involved in scuba diving, you don't want to use that specifically as an opportunity to get your mind in the right space. Your mind needs to be in the right space in order to do that. So these are reasons why exercise works so well. It involves the physical body, it involves movement, which brings us to the next one.
Just before you go to the next one, it's important to highlight, sometimes when you start exercise, you're so tired. You've got to kind of will yourself with every, bit that you've got left to convince yourself to, for example, go to the gym or put on those running shoes and go for a run. But when you're done, you feel amazing. And I know personally for me, that's happened so many times that I literally am on a high after a training session, purely because I've let the baggage go for the day. And for that hour, I was fully present in what I was doing. And because of that, mind and body being in the same place at the same time, you automatically feel good. So if you ever need convincing as to why you need to implement mindfulness in your life, use the exercise example. It's proof that it works. It's proof that when you are mindful and your body and your mind are aligned, you feel good.
True, and I think that's a good reminder, because a lot of the times we do feel like, oh, I have a bad day today at work, and we mentally drained, or we upset about something, and we don't feel like going to exercise at the end of the day. But the moment we do exercise, a lot of the times, and many a times, we actually feel a lot better, and we're glad we did do it. So cool. Which brings us actually to the final point that we want to make, and that is prayer. And speaking about movement and the body, a lot of forms of prayer involves motion. Like we pray 5 times a day, for example, and that prayer involves motion. So it brings awareness back to the body, and it makes you very much present. And a nice thing about it, for example, for us personally, is that we have this reminder 5 times a day. So we have this structure 5 times a day that we go into, that we implement. And that structure consists of a subset of structures. So it involves certain movements. And if you bring the mind to those movements, you become very much more present. And so for me, the thing is, it's about extracting the benefit from that and then taking that benefit and implementing it in other aspects of your life. So a lot of the time, for example, we look at that 5 times a day as, you could look at it in 2 ways, I guess. Firstly, people could look at it as, why 5 times a day? That could be a hindrance to your day. So they see it as an obstacle,
Cumbersome task you just need to get done.
To do, exactly. Or you could look at it as, I'm practicing. One of the main benefits is I'm practicing mindfulness. That the structure that I have to perform this throughout my day is not a hindrance, but a growth point, because it allows me to grow, because it allows me to implement discipline within my life. And no goal, for example, can be achieved without any form of discipline. So you start taking that discipline and you start implementing it in other aspects of your life. So you start becoming more aware of what you're doing. And as I said earlier, your main focus then is, when you're in prayer, for example, this is where I need to be, and I'm going to enjoy the experience. And if you approach everything else that you do outside of the prayer with that mindset, this is where I need to be, and I'm going to enjoy the experience, whether you're at work or whether you're looking after your kids or whether you're at school or studying, you will most certainly then be successful. So prayer is a very great opportunity to practice mindfulness. Even like right now, for example, and this is an interesting one because we're fasting, for example, and it's a religious fast. So, but this one involves the absence of an act, if you know what I'm saying.
The absence of eating.
The absence of eating, yeah. But still it involves the body. And so you still bring your awareness to your body and you become mindful, not just of the fact that you're not eating, but the fact that I need to speak to someone in a decent manner. I need to be kind. I can't be too hard on an individual. You start watching the manner in which you speak, or you start being more aware of your behavior. So it's all mindfulness, really. And I know, for example, the way I look at this is that when we speak about personal development, we're speaking about the following areas, which is your psychological development, your social development, emotional development, physical development, and then spiritual development. Now, with physical development, for example, we know we need to eat that food in order to develop ourselves physically. We need to eat healthy food in order to develop ourselves physically. So we won't go without it. So, for example, prayer to me is the spiritual food that we can't go without. So if I decide I don't want to eat tomorrow, I'm going to start feeling the effects of it. If I decide I'm going to continue not to eat for the rest of my life, that's going to be fatal. There'll be nothing left physically. So if when I say that prayer, for example, is the spiritual food for your soul, then if you don't do it, it's going to result in an empty shell, in a way, with nothing really to connect to. And so it's there for our growth. And so I think a lot of people look at that and they think of prayer as a means to satisfy God, but it's in fact a means to an end. It has been given to you to improve yourself here and now.
Because, not to make this too religious, but just, to talk about what we're currently experiencing by fasting, and more importantly around our prayers, because automatically when you fast, you're more conscious of your prayers. You want to do it on time. You want to be very mindful in that moment. And so, the instruction to perform prayer 5 times a day is in the Quran. Establish your salah, and salah means link. So what God is actually saying is establish your link with me. And it's so beautiful that you have this opportunity 5 times a day. What are you actually doing? You are doing the movements required, but you're very mentally present and conscious of what you're doing. And so usually, because it's so interesting, because sometimes you do the movements and then you forget where you were because you've actually become distracted. And so it's great to then just bring your mind back. But it's why I'm mentioning this is because a lot of people take prayer as, I've just got to get it done. And then there's this belief around, if you don't do it, you will be punished by God. And that is such, if you were just to, in that moment, right now, change your perception and say, no, but this is here to benefit me. This is God saying, I need to 5 times a day put myself first, quiet down my mind, have this time for me, say no to the world in that moment, and be absolutely present. You'll notice when you come out of prayer, you feel very grounded, very aligned, very at peace. And for people that don't, I met a beautiful lady once, and we were actually on a plane back to Cape Town, and we were just comparing, what we actually do in terms of our mindful practice. And she says, oh, you pray 5 times a day. And she's obviously not Muslim. She's from the Christian faith. And she says, interestingly enough, there's 5 times a day that I take to just quiet my mind and meditate for 10 minutes. And I thought it's so beautiful that her own internal clock has advised her to do this for her own benefit. Not knowing, it's the first time she heard that we pray 5 times a day. And so for me, it's really important, whether it's prayer, whether it's meditating every day, whether it's establishing a very mindful practice throughout your day, it all benefits you for your own well-being. Okay, so just before you conclude, I just think this is really important, because this is something that I share with my clients, right? As another way to practice mindfulness is when you're cooking. Cooking you've got to do. If you're the cook in the house, I'm very spoiled for the record because I'm not the main cook in the house. But when I do have the opportunities to cook, is to be very focused on what I'm doing in the moment and to really enjoy the experience. So I come from a background of, it's a cumbersome task. You need to provide for your family and extended family, and you usually don't link cooking and enjoyment together. Whereas I've learned from you, it is a beautiful way to just be present, to enjoy the experience. And it reminds me of something I read a while ago, where in this particular monastery, the monks would cook for everybody in the monastery. And so obviously they practicing mindfulness every day, all day. And so one of the head monks, I'm not really sure what you would refer to the head monk as, but the head monk would go around as the monks are cooking or chopping up vegetables and just really tap them on the shoulder very gently and ask, what are you doing? And in that moment, they possibly are cutting carrots, but it's a way to just bring them back, because it's so easy when you're doing something mundane like chopping vegetables that your mind wanders. And so it's so beautiful to just be able to have that reminder to bring yourself back. So how do we apply that in our life? Is when we are cutting vegetables, is to be very aware of what we're doing in that moment. But you could take it a step further to be appreciative of the vegetables that you actually have, to then think that this was a seed once before, and it's gone through an entire transition to get to you, which means it's been grown by a farmer, sold to a supermarket, you've gone to purchase it. And so it's also beautiful to realize how connected we all are, how everything plays a role, and that serves us. And so why not honor yourself, honor your life by being present and actually focusing on what you're doing in the moment, one task at a time.
Cool. And then I think just to end off, I think the main thing with regards to mindfulness is that it eliminates all the chaos running around in your mind. And the way and the manner in which you get rid of that chaos is to, in fact, add some structure. And that's really what it comes down to structure and focus in order to build that level of awareness.
And a reminder that benefits you. That's the whole point of the exercise.